Hey, John, it's our favorite show. It's Fanmail Friday, and you asked the following questions. Will a rotation of 5 lefties out of 6 be a problem for the Halos? Did Mickey Moniak just earn the 4th outfielder spot? And does Jordyn Adams have a shot to make the Major League roster this season? It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And John and I thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen every day. We are available on all platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can help us out by giving us a rate and a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you comment, make sure that you're subscribed, and click that bell to be notified every time a new episode drops. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. You can make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started.
Happy Friday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. Say it with us now. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
It's our favorite day of the week. It's Fan Mail Friday because we get to answer the questions of Locked On Angels listeners and viewers such as yourself, and we had some great questions come in this week, Mike. Of course, you can submit all week long. You can give us a call on our voicemail line. You can send them to us on Instagram, DM us on Twitter, whatever you'd like. Of course, you can get at us at Locked On Angels on Twitter, at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. And Mike, we talked about this. Somebody brought it up, and we talked about doing like a whole segment. And I feel like this is the perfect time to do it. And This question comes from Nathan Davis on Twitter, and he said,
"What up, Nate?
How concerned should we be about the lefty-heavy rotation, given that most lineups are mostly righty? Are there any of these guys particularly effective against righties? Hope to hear your answer on Friday." Well, it is Friday, and it's time to answer that question, Mike. Here's what I did. I pulled the stats for lefty-righty splits for each of our lefties in 2022. So it's Patrick Sandoval, Reid Detmers, Tyler Anderson, and Jose Suarez. And if you're watching on the YouTube side, I'll have those stats up there for you. But there's some interesting things to note here, Mike, particularly the FIP between left-handed hitters versus right-handed hitters for each of these guys. So why don't you take a look at Patrick Sandoval there? He's got a 2.3 FIP against lefties. That makes sense because he's a lefty. Against righties, he's got a 338 FIP. Now, what's interesting about Patrick Sandoval is he outperformed the expected FIP. Again, FIP is fielding independent pitching, which goes to show how much a pitcher can control themselves. And while he had a 213 against lefties, the expected was 328. So he actually outperformed that. He even outperformed against righties. It was a 378 expected, and he had a 338. So very interesting numbers there. A 151 average against lefties, a 271 average against righties. Finally, I want to look at the BABIP, which I think is the most important. 205 against lefties and 347 against righties. So Patrick Sandoval had righties getting a lot of contact against him, and they were putting the ball in play, and that batting average on ball in play was 347 for righties. However, it goes to show that the defense behind him really picked him up.
Yeah, hold on. I have to make this bigger because my 43-year-old eyes I want to talk about Reid Detmers because you know I'm a fan of him. And when you look at his FIP against lefties and righties last season, it's pretty close, John. It's 3.6 to 3.8. And then his expected FIP was 3.7 against lefties and 4.3 against righties.
So he outperformed that too.
He did outperform that. Here's the number that I actually thought was really interesting. His K percentage against lefties was 20.8, but his K percentage against righties was 23.2. So he actually struck out more right-handed batters. And so I'm picturing that curveball or that maybe that cutter that kind of comes in on the right-handed batter.
Yeah.
And so I can see Reid Detmers not struggling too much against right-handers. And this spring training so far, his numbers have been pretty equal, whether it's a left-handed batter or a right-handed batter. So far, Sandoval and Detmers are giving me some hope that this isn't going to be too much of an issue. What about Tyler Anderson?
Tyler Anderson is very interesting because get this, his K percentage against lefties was 20.1%. And against righties, 19.4%. So not that much of a difference there. Now, he did walk righties a bit more, 2% more. It's a 3% walk rate against lefties, 5.2% against righties. Here's something else that's encouraging. The average against versus lefties for Tyler Anderson, 234, pretty good.
Yeah.
But his versus righties was even better, 218. So Tyler Anderson does not struggle with the splits. I think that he does a very good job. Now, on that same note, the fielding independent pitching for righties and lefties both ended up being 3.3. Righties was 3.31, so just 0.01 more than lefties.
Yeah,
but
consistent.
Doesn't seem like Tyler Anderson struggles no matter who the batter up there, whoever is up there. The righties and lefties don't make a difference for Tyler Anderson.
Jose Suarez is always the anomaly, right? He's always the guy that kind of has like a really good moment and then maybe a really not so good moment.
Yeah.
And when you look at his FIP from last year, 3.7 to 3.9, it's similar. The expected FIP was 3.4 and then 4.0. So against righties, he actually outperformed it. Against lefties, he didn't outperform it. Here's where I think that we need to be concerned, John, with Jose Suarez. 227 BABIP against lefties, 309 BABIP against righties. And so when Suarez misses bats, when Suarez is throwing strikes and hitting his spots, he's really good. And he's specifically really good and needs to do that against righties. John, his K percentage against righties was 23, against lefties was 19. Here's the other number that I would be a bit concerned about lefty-righty. His home runs per 9 against lefties, 0.9. Against righties, 1.2. So there's evidence there that he could do really well. However, it's Jose Suarez's narrative.
Yeah.
He needs to be consistent. He needs to throw strikes. He needs to hit his spots. He needs to keep his pitches down. All of those things are things that we know about Jose Suarez. So after looking at just those numbers, John, I'm pretty confident in Sandoval, Detmers, and Anderson. And I think Suarez has the potential to really grow. But the numbers tell us that no matter if it's lefty or a righty, those three guys we mentioned, Sandoval, Detmers, and Anderson, are going to be pretty successful. It's not going to be leaning in one direction or the other. The only one that we would have to be concerned about is probably somebody that we have a bit of concern about, and that is Jose Suarez. And you mentioned he may not even be the 5th starter. He might be the 6th starter, and maybe
possible.
Tucker Davidson jumps in at number 5, right? So who knows where he slots in, but 3 of the 4 guys, at least lefty-righty, have been pretty consistent.
And that goes back to talking about Jose Suarez and his BABIP. It's very similar to Patrick Sandoval. The difference there versus lefties was 205 versus righties, 347.
Yeah.
So that seems concerning, but at the same time, it's just balls in play. And the fact that the defense behind them will have to pick them up is a big element. And that's going to be interesting considering our infield as well.
Well, yeah, and there's no shift. So they're not going to have that. And so that might actually play into it as well.
Finally, I did pull some stats versus our AL West rivals from last year. The Astros versus right-handed pitching hit 242 and had a 276 BABIP. Versus lefties, they hit 261 and had a 283 BABIP. So about 20-point difference, 19 or 20 points difference in average. Very close in BABIP. The Rangers versus right-handed pitching hit 236 and had a 287 BABIP. They hit 246 against lefties and still had a 287 BABIP. How about the Mariners and the A's, Mike?
Well, the Mariners had a batting average against right-handed pitchers, 229, and their BABIP was 268. Against lefties, 233, and their BABIP was 282. That's really the only stats that we care about, right? Because we just want to crush the Mariners this year. And then the A's, 214 against righties and 220 against lefties, but their BABIP against righties was 264 and then 266 against left-handed pitchers. So there is kind of a leaning in the direction of they're better against left-handed pitchers. I do think
but
that
it's not like significant.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm looking at these numbers going, I don't look at that and go, oh my gosh, we need a right-handed pitcher in there, right? I think we look at these numbers and we go, we're gonna hang tough, man. We're gonna be the new
Yeah.
kids on the block and hang tough.
What a reference on a Friday. Here we go. All right, friends, coming up on Locked On Angels, we're going to answer the question about Jordyn Adams. Now, he's had a great spring. So does that mean we're going to see him in the majors in 2023? Mike and I are going to talk about it coming up.
Today's show is brought to you by the Ultimate Pro Baseball GM game. Have you downloaded this yet? Because it's a whole lot of fun. This game will make all your dreams come true because everybody wants to be a GM. And instead of getting mad at Perry, now we can have people mad at us because we get to manage every strategic aspect of the game for your team. You can play through the season. You can lead your team to victory. You can do a whole lot of things with this game. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, managing finances, scouting, drafting players, manage difficult personalities if John's on your team, navigating your franchise through free agency and all of the ups and downs of the season. This game is challenging and very realistic. The Ultimate Pro Baseball GM is completely free and playable offline, which means that you can play on the go, play without Wi-Fi, play wherever you want and whenever you want. And Locked On Angel listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On. That's all caps, Locked On in the game store. So make sure that you download the Ultimate Pro Baseball GM game. You can visit their website, probaseballgm.com. You can scan the code if you're watching on YouTube. You see that just below my left shoulder there. Or you can look it up in the App Store. That's the probaseballgm.com website. The Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. And as we continue answering your questions for Fanmail Friday, we got ourselves a voicemail this week. Of course, you can always call us 714-409-6396. That number is in the episode description wherever you're watching or listening. You can always give us a call any time of the week. We'd love to hear from you and get your question on Fanmail Friday. So let's go to today's voicemail.
Hi, this is Ryan from Garden Grove, and I just had a kind of question/comment about Matt Thaiss. Really liked him as he was coming up through the minors, and it just seems like he's been juggled around so much. I was kind of wondering, did we ruin Matt Thaiss from, infielder, outfielder, now catcher? Did we mess my man up? Thanks, guys.
Did we mess my man up?
That's funny.
That's from Brian in Garden Grove. Brian, thank you for your voicemail and giving us a call and for your question. Let's talk about Matt Thaiss just a little bit. Mike, when he was drafted as a catcher. Now, It was the second year in a row that we drafted a catcher. First was Taylor Ward. The year after that was Matt Thaiss, both first-round picks. And then immediately, Matt Thaiss went to play first base. Since then, he's been bouncing back and forth between first base and third base. And then I looked this up. He played some outfield for the Angels in 2020. And obviously that was the blip season. That was
right.
the glitch season of 60 games where, we had to, it was all hands on deck. It was like, do you have COVID? No? Okay, you're playing, right?
You're in right field.
Exactly. So it was that kind of circumstance which got Matt Thaiss to play the outfield. But he's back to catching again. In 2021 in the minors, he's been catching pretty consistently. He does play first base and third sometimes, which is great. It's great to have that on your resume, but really his bread and butter is getting back to catching. Now, there was a voicemail from Dan and Dana Point, and we didn't air it, but we did receive it. And he said, does Thaiss know that the opponents can still run on him when he rainbows the ball back to the pitcher? Because they need to work that out of his system immediately if he's going to be an effective catcher. So I thought that was an interesting point. Like, somebody's got to tell that guy, hey, don't
stop it.
Yeah, don't beach ball it. You got to get it back to the pitcher. Mike,
like
what are your thoughts? Yeah, exactly. What are your thoughts on Matt Thaiss and just the way he's moved around?
I think that we have to look at those guys that were drafted around Taylor Ward's time, and we have to give them time. And I think what we can do now with our new guys is we are confident in the people that are developing them. But prior to that, I'm not super confident. And so I think Thaiss is working against the system a bit, or maybe the system was working against him.
Right.
And so I think a lot of that has to do with his development. I don't know if he would ever become like a Taylor Ward. I don't know if he'll ever become somebody that we can count on and rely upon. I think his ability to play different positions is really helpful.
Yeah, he's having a great spring.
Right. Although I think really what they want to see is his bat come through. That's why he
Mhm.
got to the majors. And his lefty bat, if he does come through and if he's catching, would be a great gift to this team, right? I think that there is some work that needs to be done. I don't think he's ruined. I just think that we have to give those guys that were drafted around the time that Thaiss and Ward were drafted, I think we got to give them a bit more of a runway, give a bit more time to develop and be the guys that they were drafted to be.
Yeah. And honestly, the philosophy of the Angels and the approach at the plate has changed countless times.
Yeah.
Because you go from one GM to a different manager to another GM to another manager, and it feels like Perry Manassian's influence up and down the system with the coaches he's hiring, the driveline guys, they're all on the same page in terms of how to approach the at bat, or maybe it's a pitcher on the mound, right? And I feel like you look at the evidence of Jordyn Adams, and we're going to talk about him next in the next segment. But you see like Matt Thaiss having a great spring. You see Jordyn Adams having a great spring. I feel like the philosophy, the approach is finally resonating with the players. And so hopefully it means that Matt Thaiss can break through and be a contributing factor to this team.
That's a great point, John. We got this from Twitter. Anaheim native said, do you see Mickey Moniak taking the 4th outfield spot this season? This has been a conversation for all Angel fans. Like, does Brett Phillips get it? Or does Mickey Moniak take it? Or do we try Joe Adell there? And that feels kind of like a last year move. So, Johnny, what do you think? Is Mickey won this spot? What's the best move here?
Well, I think this is coming up because Moniak is also having a great spring. But
he is.
I kind of want to run through this just to kind of explain this from all angles. To start the season, I think, Mike, you and I agree, probably going to be Brett Phillips.
Yeah.
They signed him to be that 4th outfielder. They signed him for his defense, not for his bat. And here's what it comes down to. It's not enough playing time for Mickey Moniak to be a 4th outfielder. It's also not enough playing time for Joe Adell either. To be a 4th outfielder, you're going to fill in once a week, maybe, especially if it's a 7-day game week, right? If you're playing all 7 days, then maybe you'll fill in once a week. But for the first 3 weeks of baseball, and I actually matched this up because of Shohei's starting schedule and when we would need a number 6 starter, there's 3 weeks with an off day in each week. And so you're probably going to see Trout and Ward and Renfroe out there at all times during the first few weeks of the season. Phillips is here for his defense and his speed, not his bat. And while Mickey Moniak has been very impressive in the spring, I don't know that the role they want out of Mickey Moniak is to have a great bat by being a 4th outfielder. You're likely going to get 1 or 2 innings as a defensive replacement, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. If you want to get Trout off of his feet, you put in Phillips in center field. And then again, if he's filling in maybe once a week and maybe filling in the last 2 innings of a game, that's only about 4 to 5 at bats a week for the 4th outfielder. And so it just doesn't make sense for Moniak or Joe Adell to be the 4th outfielder when you want to see what they're going to become. Right. And the only way you can do that is by giving them everyday reps, everyday at-bats in AAA. And I think that's where they're both going to start. Now, next year, certainly Moniak, Renfroe's on a 1-year deal this year, so Moniak or Adell could be his replacement. And we would feel a lot better about that if we had a full season of Moniak and Adell in AAA to see what they can do. And do they come up at some point this season? Probably. They're probably the next ones to step up if there's an injury. But of course, we don't want that. But again, I just think that if you're going to do a disservice to Mickey Moniak or Joe Adell, it's to give them that outfield spot. I think that you're serving them much better if they get everyday reps in AAA.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. The push for the NBA playoffs is here, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to rebounds to threes made. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more, and you can make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
As we continue this week's Fanmail Friday, we're getting closer to the weekend with every segment that goes by, so be excited. We got 2 questions, but they both had to do with Jordyn Adams. And the first one came from James Russell Barton on Instagram. He said, Jordyn Adams, does he have a legit shot for opening day roster or call-up in 2023? And then Aggie Nicky on Instagram said, does Jordyn Adams have a chance to play in the majors this season, or is he a for sure in 24? Mike, he's having a great spring.
He is.
So let me run through those numbers. And then there's an interesting stat that you and I found that I'll let you share. But let me run through these numbers for Jordyn Adams in spring training so far. He's had 24 plate appearances. He's scored a run 3 times. He's got 8 hits, 2 doubles, 1 home run, 6 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 4 walks, 8 strikeouts, a 400 batting average, 500 on base, 650 slugging, and that's good for a 1.50 OPS. So
I'll take it.
He's having a fantastic spring.
Yeah.
He also can play the outfield very, very well. But talk to me about this very interesting stat from Baseball Reference.
Yeah, so when we've talked about spring training, things that we need to pay attention to is who's developing and how are they developing and when are they getting hits and when are they coming through, and all of that is really important. And Baseball Reference actually has a new stat to help measure some of that. It's the quality of opposing pitchers and batters faced stat, or quality of opposition stat. And so this varies based on who they're facing. So number 10 would represent a Major League Baseball player or Major League Baseball pitcher or team. And the number 1 opposing batter is a pitcher. So it gives stats in between. And the average quality opponent that Jordyn Adams has faced this spring training, John, comes in at around 6.4.
Interesting.
Which puts him at an opponent at a AA level or a bit higher than high A, which is where he played last year.
That's where he's at.
And that's where he's really thriving. So what this actually tells me is that he's ready maybe to jump to AAA. He's ready to go to AAA and not be in AA. Now the Angels figure that out and where it'll be good for him to be. But that's what this tells me. And that's why these numbers are so great, but they can be a bit deceiving because they were against people that he should be hitting home runs against. They were against people that he should be getting on base against. And so good on Jordyn Adams for developing. I think his best move is to be maybe start in AA and move up to AAA. I think that would be a really great place for him to be at the beginning of the season.
It seems like the players they're excited about are coming out of AA. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back with the Trash Pandas wearing the hat today, representing.
Good team, good culture.
He had 62 games there last season, Mike, and he hit 249, 326, 359, and he had a 685 OPS. That's 62 games last season. So if like I mentioned earlier, if the philosophy has changed, if the hitting approach has changed, and it's working for Jordyn Adams, let's try it out in AA this year. Let's see if this spring training approach actually sticks for Jordyn Adams.
All right, John, I'm going to need your help on this one. So Roberto Ramirez asked this question on Twitter. He said, what are your bullpen roles? So I'm going to throw the inning at you, and then you're going to tell me who you're bringing in, okay?
I'm ready.
6th inning.
6th inning. I'm probably going to bring in like a Ryan Tepera.
Okay. 7th inning.
7th inning, probably like maybe Aaron Loop or Matt Moore, like a lefty there.
Okay. 8th inning.
Probably like Quijada, I think.
Okay. And then who's your closer?
Closing is going to be Herget or Estevez, depending on who we're facing in those moments. So
okay.
How do you feel about that?
I like that. Now, on your roster, is Ben Joyce playing in your bullpen?
You know what? I was doing some finagling with the roster, and if you don't have Andrew Velasquez on this team and you want to keep Tucker Davidson and kind of a swingman, maybe the 6th spot, you can actually have Ben Joyce on this roster. So there's some give and take. I totally worked it out in a spreadsheet today.
Yeah.
So I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
But,
That's good, though, because I think about Velasquez versus Joyce. What's the ROI, right? What's the return on the investment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And at this point, I think all Angel fans would say, well, with Velasquez, he can be that 8th, 9th inning defensive replacement in a close game. But with Joyce, he actually might be a guy who's going to be a help to win games in our bullpen and be an intimidating force coming out of the pen.
Now, I will say, is Nevin the kind of guy / is Perry Manassian the kind of guy who is going to give designated roles for each bullpen piece? That's a question that remains to be seen. I mean, it's hard to tell because at the end of last year, after they traded Raisel Iglesias, it was kind of like, well, let's try Tepera to close out the game. Let's try Jimmy to close out the game. There wasn't really a defined setup for the bullpen.
Right.
And we quoted Perry the other day. He said, we consider bullpen pieces everyday players, so you better like what's coming out from behind the bullpen doors. And that's an interesting thought to me. I kind of wonder, I'm reading into it a little bit more. I wonder if there are roles this season. I think they benefit from having a role. I think they benefit from knowing that, hey, you're the guy. This is your spot. You better go out there and do it. But it remains to be seen what the plan is. Obviously, they got Estevez because they think he has closer stuff.
Right.
Jimmy Herget as well has proven to be a great closer. He had about 9 saves, I think, last season.
Yep.
So this whole idea of bullpen roles, I'm kind of waiting to see how it shakes out once the regular season starts.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, last question, John, and this is a great question. Are we going to see the Padres versus the Angels in the World Series this year?
Ooh, that came from your guy, Rye, on Instagram. Padres, Angels. It's funny because the other day somebody asked us about who the Angels going to face in the World Series, which it was funny because it was like inevitably the Angels in the World Series.
Right.
And I didn't bring up the Padres. I should have brought up the Padres.
Yeah.
Man, I just think about that roster. Juan Soto. Friggin' Fernando Tatis Jr. is coming back. Xander Bogaerts, man.
Manny Machado.
Manny Machado.
And they have a good pitching staff.
They have a good pitching staff, absolutely. Yeah. And so, man, it's just what a team. And and to be honest, like maybe it's just because we live close to them, but like I root for the Padres. I like the Padres.
Yeah.
I want to see them go far. And I really thought they could do it last season, but then they made the improvements that they did. Josh Hader is going to close out games for them. I think that, you know, his wife was going through some issues at the time when he got traded. And so that was on his mind. It was weighing heavy on him and kind of messed him up after he got traded, but he seemed to get back on track. I think he's going to be a shutdown closer for the Padres. So Padres Angels, man, I would love to see that 100%.
Today's show is brought to you by, I'm sorry, it's not brought to you by anybody. It's the finish of the show. We're thankful that
We're
you
done.
are
It's
listening.
the weekend,
Wow.
Mike.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. Matt and Dom are ready to give you the best strategy to win your league. You can find their podcast wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. They're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, be sure to get at us on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, comment below the video. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the best way you can help us out to help more Angel fans get to know us and get to Locked On Angels. We want to share our fan-guided wisdom with them as well. Speaking of which, Mike, after this weekend, what do we have coming up on Monday's show?
Well, we're going to give you a roster update. We're going to talk about who's left on this roster and talk about when it'll actually be cut down to the 25 or 26 man, depending on how many they want to keep. And then we're also going to talk about what happened this weekend, because there's some games this weekend, not just for spring training, but also the WBC. So a lot to get to. So join us on Monday on Locked On Angels.
Can't wait to get to Monday so that we can get back here and talk to you on Locked On Angels. We hope you have a great weekend. In the meantime, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us. Have yourselves a great weekend. St. Patty's Day. Happy St. Patty's Day to you. Celebrate responsibly, and we'll see you back here on Monday.